Cybersecurity Refined and Feral, where refinement meets chaos in the digital wilderness. We will bring you perspectives from a seasoned professional and another with 5 years of experience. Join us while we discuss the challenges of our profession from multi-generational views with unique mother-daughter conversations.
Hello, everyone. My name is Candy Alexander, and I'm joined by my lovely daughter, Cailin Sullivan. Want to welcome you to our new project that we've decided to take on for 2025. So welcome to our new little project, which is, of course, a podcast. However, it's not going to be any podcast. We're going to be adding a different twist to it. So if you haven't noticed, again, multi-generational here with the mother-daughter combo. And we thought that this would be interesting for folks to listen in and hear about our conversations. The idea for this podcast came about when Cailin and I would talk once a week because we're in 2 different states. And I really, of course, like any parent, missed my child immensely. So we would start, talking once a week. Both of us, of course, being in cyber, our conversations gravitated to our jobs and some of the challenges. Or, for example, Cailin has been lucky enough to grow up in this profession since she was a little thing, and was able to come to RSA with me since she was like in junior high school. So she's been going to RSA for more years than most people have been in the profession. So, and we've naturally navigated our mother-daughter conversations to a lot of the things we're seeing or feeling or experiencing in our profession. So we decided one night, hey, a lot of people could really benefit from listening to our conversations. We do take a different approach. Both of us have an out of the box, if there is such a thing as a box, out of box or a unorthodox view on cyber. So that's a little bit of what we're planning for this podcast and how it came about. So you might be wondering about the name Cybersecurity Refined and Feral. And I'm going to turn that over to Cailin because she is the creative one that came up with that name. So Cailin, you want to explain how you came about with that interesting name?
Yes. So I was talking with one of my former coworkers about how you and I are both in the same profession. And she, knowing me being so mischievous, had made a comment about how, does your mom know that you are a menace? And I was like, yes, because I am her mini-me, except I am a lot more feral and she is much more refined. And that immediately, I was like, ooh, that's kind of catchy. So here we are.
Oh, catchy is the understatement, I think, but it is true. And so why don't you go ahead on and give us a little idea about who Cailin is and a little bit about yourself. And of course, it's ever so interesting to hear about how people got into the profession. So you want to share with our listeners?
Yes. So I currently work as a senior security compliance engineer at a startup based in Boston called AppQs. It is a fully remote company. I handle a lot of our operational security. I do our compliance stuff. I am actually a newly elected president of ISSA New England chapter. So that will also be a lot of fun. I am actually also in school pursuing my bachelor's of science, majoring in cybersecurity management and policy, and then also trying to decide, which I'm already halfway through and I'm kind of on the path, so I guess we're doing it, double major in software development and security. what else is happening? I have too many things going on. How did I get into cyber? So I was attending a CISO forum dinner with ISSA with you, and Brian Krebs had spoken about the target breach back in 2013, and I was working in a PCI room at a call center at that time, so it was relevant to me, and I was like, oh wow, this is actually pretty interesting. I know a lot of these terms and like why it's bad and etc. So that's when I decided I wanted to try and move into InfoSec. Um, Long story short, it was a catch-22 for a while without having experience, without having any education, trying to navigate and get into the field. I leveraged network. So my previous manager at that company had called me from Carbonite, um, and had said, come help me in finance, because I was doing order management at that time. Come help me in the finance. Just give me a year and then we can try and move you over internally at Carbonite. Ended up moving onto the compliance team there. Then they got acquired and I was moved onto the TVM team. And then I applied at AppQs, and here we are almost 5 years later.
I can't believe it's been 5 years.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But you said a couple of catch things that I think some of our listeners will pick up on, and that's, the catch-22 aspect of, how can I get an entry-level job when I have no experience, which is, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, that can be a topic for a whole nother discussion.
Yeah. And maybe we do go down that road. And I think, just to give our listeners who might be in that predicament a little bit of a tidbit. So, this is one of those mother-daughter conversations that we had. And so, I had recommended to you when you were over at Carbonite and at your other location to start raising your hand when they wanted volunteers. And so when you were over at Carbonite, thankfully, somehow or another, miraculously, we had GDPR come about and they needed some privacy
champions,
security champions. Yeah, so that's how you got your little toe in the door there. So I think, I get that question a lot from folks as to, well, how do I get my start? And you have to be creative and you have to be opportunistic for those chances to, nudge your way in. So that was good. Anything you want to add on that experience?
Yeah, that brings back some memories too, because I remember you pushing me also to talk to the director of InfoSec, meet with her, and express my interest in InfoSec to try and get myself out there. And it was definitely intimidating, but I did it, and I think that's what helped get me into the InfoSec team.
Yeah, that was good. So I hope that generates some ideas for some of our listeners who are in the same predicament, because again, whether you're out of school, still in school, or looking to do cross career, that's probably the biggest question I get hit with. So all right, so let's shift gears a little bit. You probably, if you don't know, I have heard my name. I've been around a while. Let me introduce myself. So again, Candy Alexander. I have been in cybersecurity or information security. I don't even care to tell you how many years. You know how crazy I am, but I think, Cailin, you were probably, maybe a year old when I had been pulled in to cyber. And this is going to be like one of the craziest stories ever. So for those of you, again, who don't know me and my background, I started working at Digital Equipment Corporation when I was a child. I was, like 4 years old. Ha ha. Add probably another 20 something to that. But started at Digital Equipment Corporation, and we had an activity occur to our company that was really known throughout the world, and that was Kevin Mitnick broke into our network and stole the VAX VMS version 5 software. So it was quite the traumatic experience. There's books written about it, so feel free, do some research. It was crazy. That's really when Kevin got his name in the world, along with his partner Lenny DeChico. So Digital had decided that they needed to, of course, prepare, or recover from this event, and that if it happened once, it's going to happen again. So they essentially built a security team, globally. It was amazing. And before this time, there was like, I don't know, 2 guys at corporate security, that were like old military guys. Great guys, by the way. I still have very fond memories and learned a lot from them. But they created a security team, and the engineering team created a compliance monitoring software package, and they needed somebody to go around the country and teach it. And I happened to be working in a learning center, so they in an engineering facility. So they said, "Hey, you want to learn how to do this and help us spread the word?" And I said, "Sure, of course. I'm never saying no to any opportunity." And again, that goes back to the opportunistic quality that we need to have, especially, I hate to say this, as women in security. So
I would, if I could interject,
oh yeah,
I would also encourage, never say no, because you're not going to know if you like doing something unless you try it. I take that approach and am very vocal about it with my manager. If he asks me if I want to do something, I'm like, Chrissy, I'm never going to tell you no unless I know that I don't like it. So,
right, right, absolutely. You don't know until you try.
mhm.
And that seems to be like adage that my mother had told me, and obviously I passed it down to you. But so, back to the story. So I took on that challenge, and I was actually, I jokingly refer to myself as the poster child for going around the country and teaching. It was called Captain. And I can't remember the acronym, but that's how I learned about security, because it was, again, a security program for VAX VMS. And for any of you timers out there, that was an incredible operating system and very robust. And so from there, it just, I've been around the world and back, truly, physically and virtually, working in cyber for the past 35, 36 years. So, you've grown up with cybersecurity, and I've grown up in cybersecurity, or with it. As the profession has grown and matured, so hadn't I, from the private, or should I say public sector, in a public corporation. So yeah, that's how I got my start. It's been a fun ride. And of course, it's not over yet. It's funny because I remember having a boss back at Digital at one of my many transitions of organizational changes. And she came to me and she said, "Candy, I think we really need to work on career planning." Great, let's talk. And she said, "I think you really ought to find another career path, because this is a dead end job." So thankfully, I didn't listen to her, and thankfully, she was wrong.
Wow.
So
What
yeah,
were some of
yeah,
her suggestions?
it was just crazy. But Like I said, I've been around a long time, done a whole lot of things, and I've worked through, many challenges. I got involved with ISSA, Information Systems Security Association, back in the 90s. And it was only because, again, digital was very forward thinking when it came to systems security. And they decided way back then that they wanted to send their security team to get certified from ISC squared, or ISC 2, as they refer to themselves now. So this is way back when, where we actually had, one of the founders come in. He was an instructor at Digital. And we brought the whole team in from all over the world. And, that poor guy had to try and teach all of us. And it was very comical. I could go into some stories, but we'll save those for future episodes. But like so many today, that once you get your certification, you have to keep up that certification with CPEs. And ISSA was like the only game in town back then. So I signed up, joined the chapter there in Boston, which, of course, you're the president-elect. I'm a former president of the chapter. And I progressed up to being international president for 5 years after serving on the board of directors at International for 20. So yeah, I've been around a long time. I've got a whole lot of stories. And again, this is one of the reasons why this podcast should be a lot of fun, talking about some of those stories. Because here's the other thing that you and I talked about, Cailin, is it's about as well the forgotten history. Right? That we need to recognize the mistakes and the successes of our past and how we got here, understand how we got here, so we have a more holistic approach moving forward.
Yeah. And then we can take lessons learned from the past and avoid them in the future. I remember when the cloud computing stuff was coming back out, and you and maybe Win Schwartel, who was a luminary, where everybody was talking about how, the cloud was a thing way back when. That's just it's an old concept. So we're just going to go back and forth between the old concept and a new concept. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's funny because it's true. Because back at digital equipment, we had, centralized computing. That's what we called it back then. Centralized computing, right? And it's so revolutionary. And then they decided to do distributed computing, which was kind of a twist. So it was, centralized, then it went distributed, which then they came back to centralized, but they called it clustering, right? I mean, you think about where we are today, evolutionarily speaking, in technology, and now we're just calling it cloud. And so, it's wild. But to your point, if I didn't go through those experiences, I'd be mind blown. How are we going to do this? And here's the ironic thing, is that it's the same principles of securing the environment from a central computing perspective, decentralization, remote workers, to now again centralized, but we call it cloud. So it's what that Red Auerbach saying, but it's it's like deja vu all over again. So yeah. So I think we've got a lot of conversations that are going to be fun and interesting, and hopefully enlightening and thought provoking, right?
Yeah. Definitely want this to be kind of a judgment-free zone where we can have open discussions, almost like a conversation, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, you've accompanied me with a lot of the ISSA events and functions. sometimes, actually, I'm thinking back, you never really did complain. You always were, okay, let's
Yeah.
go. And, those were the places where we had a lot of really interesting conversations, like the, cyber executive forums. And it was very, methodical and theoretical type conversations, kind of like, I hope we have here. And I hope that at some point in time we can, rally our, allies, friends, and colleagues, see if we can convince them to join us in some of these wacky yet entertaining and informative and thought-provoking conversations, as well in our future.
Mm-hmm.
So, thinking about again where we're going with this podcast, and that, all of the adjectives you described, open discussion, judgment free zone, and, like almost nothing is off limits here. But baseline, keeping it respectful. We want to be clear on that. There will be, respect at all times, maybe tongue in cheek at times,
Sarcasm because we're from Boston. Yeah.
or a little bit feral.
Yes, my specialty.
Exactly. So I think, let's share with our listeners about some of our passions. Like, we do have complementary passions in that we don't necessarily, we're on two different paths. Things that I'm really jazzed about and interested in, you have a different perspective, which is always enlightening and entertaining and informative. So why don't you share with our listeners like some of your passionate topics and, areas that you'd like to explore and go deeper into conversations on?
Yes. So I am a huge nerd for privacy issues, regulatory compliance type stuff surrounding privacy issues, ethics in technology and ethics in tech design, um, as well as I love fishing people at work. It's one of my mischief making times where I get to have some fun. But going back to the privacy stuff, I think that might be, I think that's an interesting spot where we can talk about generational differences. Being a millennial, I grew up with the internet. I didn't grow up on the internet. I remember life before smartphones and social media. And I think a lot of the younger generations now, as horrible as that is for me to say, they don't necessarily take privacy as seriously as someone like my peers and my age. Even people that aren't in cybersecurity, that are around my age, are concerned about privacy issues. So yeah, I think that could be a good deep dive.
Oh, without a doubt, because it's definitely, to your point of multi-generational, or it's a generational conversation, is that each of the generations, that we have officially defined, do have different perspectives on that, and I think, when we first had this conversation as one of our mother-daughter, talks, I was actually, to be quite frank, I was really surprised at your position and how your concern about privacy, and the manipulation of social media, and I was relieved, to be quite frank, that it isn't lost. Those concerns aren't lost on the younger than me, shall I say, generations, which there were a couple. But so that was a relief. But then at the same time, I know you're very passionate about it, and you taught me a lot about what really is going on. And it was alarming, absolutely alarming, especially when, one of the few times we were together and we sat and watched that documentary about Cambridge Analytica and
Mm.
how incredibly so data scientists can manipulate social media and messaging and information
Yeah.
to sway people to go how they want you to go or to think what you want to think. It was shocking.
Yeah, that's definitely like an aspect of privacy and technical design ethics, right? Um, and I feel like my age group, generation, whatever, has a special relationship with social media, with the internet, because we grew up together.
Hmm.
So I know a lot of the origins of different like random jokes that are online and what their original intention was and all this other stuff. But the greatest hack is that documentary on Netflix. And another one that was really good was the Antisocial Network that talks about like the history of is it it's I think it's 4chan, not 8chan, and how social media has affected society and influenced polarization. And that all
It's
that stuff, the sociology, the psychology, I love it. I would, if I don't know, I sort of want to major in either sociology or psychology because I think they would tie really good with security, but I
yes.
I also want to learn technical things. So,
That's the problem. There's just so much out there,
yeah.
right? And I think again, this is one of those examples of where it's been refreshing for me to have, my daughter in the same, profession, that we can have these really deep and intellectual, hopefully, conversations. But at the same time, this is one of the goals and objectives I'd like to have from this podcast is to have the underlying theme that we're learning from each other. I mean, I'm 36, 30, whatever years in the profession, but yet I'm learning from
Mm.
you who are 5+ years in the profession. And isn't that what it's all about, is to learn from each other? And just because you've been doing something for a long time doesn't mean you know everything there is to be had about that topic. And I embrace that thinking, and hope
Mm.
that we can get others to understand and appreciate, no matter whom you meet during your day, during your job, during whatever activity, that there's always something to learn from that experience. So, yeah, I relish and I cherish that at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
One of my
yeah.
favorite quotes from my now coworker at AppQs is I have been confiding in him about how I was like scared or like nervous, self-conscious about like the more I learn, the more I understand how much I don't know.
Hmm.
And he was like, "Oh no, that's just like a normal engineer thing. Like that's not a you thing. That's just like because everything is
Yeah.
so big and so deep. The more you learn about something, the more you realize how much you actually don't know. So being
Yeah.
in a mindset of constantly learning is a requirement for security, I think."
I think it's just a healthy way of life as well.
Mm.
It's something you touched on too, and we've talked about numerous times. And I never knew it was a thing till we talked, and that's that imposter syndrome, which is like so like in to talk about now. But I mean, I remember again when I started at digital, it was me and Robin Wheeler. Call out to my BFF, Robin. It was her and I, and against all these others. It wasn't against, working with all these guys in IT, and we were always picked on. And that's probably why we became such good
Mm.
friends. And I say picked on in a like lovingly way. We were treated as the little sisters. So, much like, a family unit, they would pick on us, but, help whoever did pick on us that weren't in that IT family or tech family. They were, right there to, step up and speak up for us. So that was pretty cool. But, again, that imposter syndrome has been around since the beginning of time, and especially in cyber. And it's almost a shame because it seems, one of my observations of being in this profession for so long is that it's very rare when you can truly find a group of individuals who celebrate each other and raise each other up, because we're very competitive. Like, I hate to say this, but I'll say it because we said we were going to be controversial when necessary. You look at LinkedIn and everybody's a rock star, and trying to outdo and outshine each other. And it's like, instead, why don't we, raise each other up and be happy and celebrate the learning from each other, as opposed to trying to outshine, outdo, and it's kind of sad, and that really does contribute to the imposter syndrome, because even after Cailin, after 30 something years, I still get it. Like, I'll get onto LinkedIn and I'll say, dang, that person like got it going on, and I'm just a schlep. But the other side of me is like, it's like a split person. I was like, you're not a schlep. You've been around. You got this. You know this. So it's like my split personality is like saying, yeah, I got it. And then the other one's like, but no, look at them. It's like, stop doing that. Stop the comparison. Just celebrate. Yay for that person. But at the same time, I will be, and I think we could challenge all of us, right? Get on LinkedIn and say, I am so proud of you. I've done that, with my friends from the Bahamas. And because it's true, it's remarkable to see the accomplishments that they've made in the past few years. And I celebrate that, and I'm proud of them. So
I will counter and say that I don't necessarily think it's just because people are acting like rock stars. Like, there's definitely like a problem with ego in our profession. But guess what is actually driving that more is social media algorithms.
That's true. It's that damn social media. Yeah. We're following it. We're drinking that Kool-Aid, aren't we?
I know, it's terrible.
So we'll have to have this conversation, because this is a good one, because I want to know your thoughts and those of our listeners. And if anybody wants to join us in a conversation, let me know. Come on in and let's sit down. But I want to explore that further. Like, well, what can we do to, break those algorithms and let's build a healthy community, as opposed to, geez, they're such a winner and I'm such a loser, because that's not healthy at all.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh, that's funny. All right. So are those your interests now that we've gone down that rabbit hole?
Yes. Well, this is just like how we normally are, though, isn't it? Like, just.
I think it's what happens when you get two ADD people in a room.
Yeah.
There's squirrels all over the place.
So, yes, what are your interests, Candy?
Oh, I thought you'd never ask. Oh, man, I'm telling you, it's like your challenge of like, I want to learn this, I want to learn this and this and this and this and this. Well, of course, I too am always fascinated by the newest technologies, right? And so, of course, the latest bug that I've gotten into, as you know, is the AI, artificial intelligence, and ML, machine learning, and all of the different variations and challenges thereof. So that has been something I've been exploring now that I have stepped down from ISSA International and all of those crazy responsibilities that took up my life. I'm now able to step back, step down, step in at a contributor level to the Cloud Security Alliance and their AI research working groups, which is a ball. It is so much fun. And I would really encourage our listeners to, step up and volunteer. You can sign up for those working groups. You can sit in those meetings and just absorb and learn, or you can contribute. There's no pressure, which I love. But just sitting in those meetings, I am, talk about celebrating people. I am sitting in those meetings and it's like, oh my gosh, these people are so smart. And, just absorbing by listening is just crazy. So AI definitely, and it's almost, let's go back to the conversation we had earlier of knowing history, knowing the foundations, knowing how we got to where we are, and then being able to apply those. Because, everybody's talking about AI and how scary it is and everything else, and I probably am oversimplifying it because that's what I do, right? So people can understand, including me, is when we think about AI, think about it as an identity, as a person almost, right? And does that person need to have access to that data? What are they going to do with it? And then put parameters and boundaries and think about it from that perspective and not fear, because here's another challenge that I had from like day one of being in this profession. How am I going to stay up on all of this information? It's like drinking from a water hose. And I'm going to tell you right now, you can't. You just can't do it. So don't drive yourself crazy. And I still do to myself. It's one of those conversations I have with myself every day.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. It'll come. Whatever's important to you will come to you, and you'll naturally gravitate and absorb, right? So there's that. So that's a whole lot of explanation and talk about my interest in AI. And then another really passionate area of topics for me is, of course, the profession, because I've grown up with it. I've been in ISA for 30 something years.
Oh, that's such a good point, is that you grew up in the profession and I grew up with the internet.
Yes.
How interesting.
Yeah, pretty cool. That's that multi-generational thing going on again. But yeah, so professional development. I've done a lot of work with ISSA on research. We partnered with ESG, Enterprise Security Group, and one of my dear friends and colleagues, John Ulstick. I've presented several times at RSI with him on this research survey we did. So have a lot of insights in there, which I think, would be another good future topic. And that can go all over the place. Like, what's happening with our profession today? How did we get to where we are today? What are the challenges? Certifications. Anybody who's seen my presentations at RSA and talking with John, I'm really passionate about certifications, which I can't remember the last count. It was like ridiculous.
It was like 110.
More like 180, 170 something. Yeah, certifications out there. So obviously that's a moneymaker for somebody. But let's focus on the really good ones, the ones that are worth obtaining. So we'll go into those topics. But I think, between the two of us and then our listeners, whatever topics you folks have, let us know. We're ready to, have an honest and open conversation with the intent of sharing knowledge and beginning conversations that you can have with your colleagues and whatnot. So the more we talk, the more we learn from each other. So that's pretty much where we're going, right?
Yeah, super excited. It should be
Yeah.
really, really fun. I can't wait to drag people into chit-chatting with us.
Yeah. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up at this point for our introduction episode. I am so happy for all of you who have tuned in and have sat and listened to our crazy, conversations and where we're going to go with things. But we do appreciate you doing that. And we ask that you consider subscribing to our podcast, that you give us a thumbs up, that you provide us comments and feedback. You can, surely reach out to us. My email is candy@alexander-advisory.com. And Cailin, you want to share your email?
It is csullivan@issa-ne.org.
And we'll put those emails in the description. But again, subscribe and buckle up, because we're going to have a fun ride in the future. And until next time,
stay secure, stay refined, but don't be afraid to be a little feral.